transparency and defend Georgia's sovereignty. Demonstrators say Georgia will see the same clampdown on media as in Russia, where similar legislation is already in place. Earlier, I spoke to Batu Kotelia, former Georgian ambassador to the U.S. and former head of Georgia's Foreign Intelligence Service. Ambassador, you have been yourself at protests that are stretching into Tuesday morning in Georgia. Tell us what you have seen.
Yes, this protest has been one of the biggest protests that Georgia has seen since regaining its independence, and one of the biggest characterization of this protest and the optics of it is that we see in a big number young people, so-called Gen Z, protesting, and they are protesting the encroached authoritarianism in the country. But also what I have seen, and we all have seen and witnessed and felt on ourselves, is an enormous brutality and violence from the government. And it seems that it's a deliberate measure to scare people and not to allow them protest again or express their constitutionally guaranteed rights of free speech and demonstration.
The governing party says that this legislation would increase transparency and also ensure that Georgia does not get pulled into a conflict with Russia. What is your response to that?
Well, first of all, this law has nothing to do with transparency because this law is discriminatory. It identifies those organizations, civil society and media outlets as foreign agents, exactly in the same way as Russia did it. We can also see that the purpose of this law is to punish them. Now, as an outcome of the protest or the government reaction of synchronized mob attacks on the civil activists, creating some database of so-called foreign agents, as the chairman of the parliament proposed recently, it's very much in line with the authoritarian way of silencing the opposition. I can guess that they learned some lessons from their recent rapprochement with the Chinese Communist Party, because we've seen the Georgian ruling party has a frequent visits to China and signing some strategic partnership agreements with them.
So, Ambassador,
again,
I just want to jump in there and ask you one question about this. So what you're describing here, the Georgia Dream Party that has introduced this legislation again after it tried to last year, it's been in power since 2012. It was voted back into power in 2020 and did vow to normalize ties with Russia. So despite these protests, how do we know that these protests really represent what the majority of Georgians want?
First of all, the biggest sign of this protest is immediate reaction of the society of introduction of this law. So the understanding on the reading of this law, and not only the letter, but the spirit of the law, really brings a chilling memory for the elder generation of Soviet Union, but for the younger generation, something that was so precious for them, to being so close to Europe and our European future as part of the free nations of the European family. So this combination of these two factors are our recent historical experience with Soviet Union and totalitarianism, and now the government's zeal to violently clinch to the power and they capture the state, which they already done quite effectively, is the factor that we got up to 200,000 Georgians protesting in the streets.
Right.
So for a country that's 3.5 million, that's a really outsized protest.
Yeah, they have been incredibly dramatic protests, as you said, Ambassador. I just want to ask you, the final voting on the proposed legislation is scheduled for Tuesday. The Prime Minister has vowed that this will pass. What will protesters then do if it does pass?
I think with this last and final step, which already they demonstrated today when they had a committee hearing, and in 67 seconds, this third hearing was accomplished, which is very much in line with this authoritarian ruling system. Yes, Georgian Dream will pass this threshold of irreversibility to the normal democratic processes, and we will have a full-fledged authoritarian system. And as always in authoritarian system, we will retain our right to protest in the streets, but we very much do hope for our external friends, international democratic community, to support us, because this fight is not only the Georgia versus its authoritarian government. We understand that we are part of a bigger context of global fight of democracy with authoritarianism. This is our part of the front line. And we are trying to keep this front line, but we do need an external assistance as well.